Yeah, thanks, Peter. That was great. Peter and I, we've had a number of discussions, but it's always about the art form logistics. So it was great to see the work and the progress of your work. A couple questions I have on your early work. When you started painting, were you consciously trying to paint like Diebenkorn, or did you just start painting and subconsciously it came out like Diebenkorn?
It kind of both, but not really either one in a way. It's a lot of it was because of the Southwest. I remember the first time I ever saw a Diebenkorn paintings before I started to paint, and it was Mark Rothko's the other guy that when I first saw him, I went, wow, it just stopped me. And it did something to me. And so when I started painting, I thought maybe I can do something like that, but I was not trying to, and now I fight it. I try not to, because it's, but you're always going to have influences. It's just, you can't fight them. But so the answer is kind of, but not really. I just didn't really have anything in mind either. I think a lot of abstract painters don't really have something in mind. I know, but Ali does when he does his, because he has a story behind it. I know Anna does. With hers, there's a whole thing there, but mine, I think, Don, maybe yours a little bit more, your abstract stuff, they kind of go where they go. You've kind of said that, because a lot of painters, you talk to abstract painters and they'll say, the painting's kind of fighting me, or the painting's not going where I wanted it to go, or you kind of deal with it that way. So that's what I got. So I think that's an answer.
Okay, and then my other question, I have Procreate. I played with it a little bit, but I haven't done much. So it was interesting to see what you've done with it. So when you, like that last piece, I think you said it was 48 by 32, something like that.
Yeah.
So Procreate, are you working at a really large resolution to get it to print that?
No. Well, I've got an iPad, the Pro. I've got the big 12-inch iPad. You can make the canvas that big, but no, I think they come out. The issue is how big you're doing it. So I don't really care to blow them all up. So I mean, if I wanted to, I could make it a bigger canvas, and then the pixels would be tighter. And I mean, the technology will let you, if you get the resolution tight enough, it will let you print up to 6 feet by 8 feet if you wanted to. But I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in using as a tool, Procreate as a tool, as an interim one piece of it. And I've told Alan, I have a brother who's a painter, and he's a figurative painter, does big stuff, big pieces. And he's always, we argue about, is it all, using Procreate or using digital stuff. So to my mind, I don't use effects or I just use it. And to me, it's like painting with watercolor or oil. I mean, you have the pen, you have the thing, and it goes on the same way. It's very, very similar. It's just a lot faster, and you can play with things and experiment with things, because that, unlike paintings, there's an undo button. So you can go, no, that didn't work very well. So let me go back and try it again. So, so no, I'm not that big. So it depends on how, if you want to print them out. But yeah, I find going with something as a reference point, but a lot of the stuff you look at online at Procreate, it's very, very detailed, kind of graphical type of things. But my rules for myself were, I'm not going to use filters. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use it as a tool. And it's partly because of my background as a printer. It seems like a new way of doing printing. So it's kind of like a monoprint in a way. So you start with pieces, you take a picture of it, you transfer it, you manipulate the photograph, then you print that out. Now you have a piece of paper with something on it, and you paint on that. And I don't know what to call it other than digital combine or mixed media, but it's a multi-step process.
Great. Paul has a question.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for that. I was really impressed by your restless creativity. I love that in artists. I find I went to a Magritte exhibition in Tokyo, and I was surprised by some of the things that he did that I wasn't aware of, but I was kind of disappointed that he kind of just did the same things again and again and again and again. And that's not to criticize your series, which I love, but you just do so many different things. And I love that. My question is about the series. Okay, I just wrote a note here. I really loved the idea of you making a series based on the Goldberg variations. I've done similar stuff in poetry. You also mentioned James Joyce, Genji Monogatari, and Macbeth. And so I wanted to ask you, how else has music and literature informed your art? I love that interrelation between different genres and art forms. So
Yeah, so that's a great question. It is not just that. I'll throw one more thing in. I'm a big amateur reader of quantum physics. I'm just enthralled with quantum mechanics and all. And I just kind of understand it at a very cursory level. So I think I like to be able to, because a lot of times I'll do the picture and then I'll see something like the one I said to Transmigration of Souls. That's a quote from Ulysses. They come to me, the words, the titles sometimes come to me, but music has a lot to do with it. I mean, there's a rhythm to when you're starting to do things. I mean, and a lot of painters have done that. I mean, the one I always think of that I think people maybe misunderstand in some ways is Jackson Pollock, because his stuff, I mean, it looks like he just threw paint down on he didn't. I mean, it was on the floor, but he had all these methods with, and he would do that. It was repetitive, and there's a rhythm. If you see it and you know that, and you see it in person, it's musical. I mean, it's chaotic, but there's rhythm there. So yeah, and Paul, because you live in Japan, I mean, I lived there a long time ago, but I really there's a whole bunch of things that I like about Japanese culture. The whole idea of, I never studied pottery there, but the whole idea of the way that potters use it, and the whole concept, which I think is, the words are overused, the wabi-sabi is overused, but I like the idea of happy accidents or things, not turning out. So two things that come from quantum mechanics in a way are emergent behavior, which is things you can't predict. I mean, and that the whole is that the pieces all together are greater than the whole. It's quantum mechanics gets kind of weird. And then the idea of unintended consequences, where you don't know what you're doing. But so the series all come to that. But those things, as I read and do that kind of stuff, come into it for sure.
Oh,
it's not just classical guys. I mean, I like jazz guys, and I like some rock and roll stuff from my youth.
You mentioned Steely Dan. The Goldberg Factorals really reminded me of Brian Eno's 77 million paintings. Do you know that? I don't, but that's 77 million is like a fraction of, because this is several trillion, I think. Each one was a different one. No, I don't, but I'm a big Brian Eno fan, so I'll look it up. It's this amazing series he did. It's kind of like algorithmic with music and paintings as well. I'll put it in the chat. Anyway, thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate it. That was fascinating. Sure. So one thing before, it's a shameless plug, I know, but so I did a series of six or eight pieces on the atomic bomb, on the making of the atomic bomb, and and I called it Trinity. The first one is about Los Alamos and the explosion of the bomb in August of 40, whatever that was, 45, 44, and then a week and a half later dropping it on Hiroshima, and a week and a half later dropping it on Nagasaki. And I had them, and I through Instagram connected with a musician, and we started a collaboration a year ago, and he's written music for these now. And we're almost ready to release it. And when we release it, we'll put it on Instagram, we'll put it on YouTube, but we're going to put it on Spotify. I don't know what will happen of it, but it's interesting to collaborate with a musician who actually used, and then, so I gave him the art, and we talked about the art, and I told him what I thought the art would, and the sequencing of the things. And then he wrote the music, and then together we kind of said, okay, let's make the flow go this way. So it's interesting, and it'll be out in a month or so. I love it. Fantastic. Yes, Lee.
I have a question about the physical space that you work in. We can see the dimensions of a space behind you, but it's not sufficient to do the kinds of canvases that you work on. tell us about yeah, are you going to turn that around?
There's the big canvas. You can see it over there.
Okay.
I've got a big wall in the back that's 8 feet high and 16 feet wide, maybe, that I keep clear. The stuff that's hanging on the wall, I do that. So it's basically 20 by 20.
Mhm.
It's a 20 by 20 space. But I'm running out, you run out of space, so it's hard to do. But I paint flat. I've got a big old easel that I use, but it's not a very big space, but a lot of people have smaller spaces.
And you must have a significant storage space some other location.
I don't, a lot of them, I've got a couple of flat files under this table. So I keep a lot of stuff there because you can keep a lot of things. I do there are a lot of resorts and hotels around, which is, I have stuff in those. I'll paint things instead of having them in storage. I'll at least put them in and rotate them through local
Where they'll be
venues.
seen. Mhm.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm trying not to do that. My brother, who I reference, he's been doing it for 60 years. He has 1,000 paintings, and his paintings sometimes are 8 feet by 12 feet. So he has some serious storage issues. But luckily he built a big studio. But it kind of comes with the territory. I mean, Don, you said it, that you have rolls, you do big paintings on rolls, and I mean, I think painters do you got to figure out a way of doing it. And if you're not, I mean, Anna, I think it seems like yours kind of go out to galleries quite, pretty, that's the perfect world. So, but yeah, Lee, I wish I had more space, but my wife said, no, you can never, one rule, no storage units. So that's that. Anne, do you have a question?
There we go. Well, first, thank you so much for bringing all of this information and expertise to us. I'm in this group as really, I'm a photographer. I don't really do anything else. But I do almost all abstract. And I'm finding myself now doing a lot of layering in Photoshop.
Mhm.
And they're coming out more and more like paintings. And so you have to kind of, give it a name, like, well, is this a painting? Is this a thing? But what interested me, and I'm not sure I got all the details, is you would take the palette papers,
Yeah.
and you put like a piece of plexiglass and do like the pressure on that to transfer it onto that, or how did you do that?
No, it's not even. So I have all of these things. So I get a lot of frames from Dick Blick, and they have these really cheap plexi kind of sheets on them. So I take those out, and,
Right.
and if I sell it, I put good glass in it. So I use those as palettes when I'm painting, and then I use these paper palettes as well. But then I have 10 or so plexiglass plates that were from monotypes that I've done at a printing place. So what I'll do is I'll take like this is a piece that has paint on it, but it was a palette. It's just random. And then I look at that, but then I have the transparent piece that is either a plexi plate, or Mylar, big sheets of clear stuff. And on that, what I didn't show you is that one of the things early on with the maps, I'd drawn, I don't know, 16 or 17 of the maps, and I put them all up, and I did these, it was 8 feet wide and 8 feet high and 12 feet wide. And I put them all together, and it was a really interesting, but I don't know, it's just kind of a conceptual piece because it's Mylar sheets, so they were just taped to the wall. But it's a combination of something that's transparent, and sometimes it could be 2 layers of transparent, and then something that is the background could be, sometimes it was a painting, sometimes it's a piece of paper. Often it's my window in my studio. There's a couple in there that there's this nice reds and all that. That's the reflection, that's the parking lights on my car coming through the window. So that's what I do. I mean, they're not, that's what I don't know what to call them, because that's why I call them digital combines, because they don't really exist in 3 dimensions other than all these different pieces of things I find in my studio, and then take a picture of it. Then sometimes I do alter it digitally, and print it out and then do something else. But it's the same kind of thing. If as you're layering them, you're gonna find the same thing. But ultimately, they're in a way they're a photograph. Mine are
Well,
too.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to kind of bridge the gap there, because I liked it. I took your advice a while back and I started doing serial things. And these are, they're all digital. And yet I kind of want to incorporate a physical piece in there. And like you're saying, just take a photograph of it. I'm like, duh, I didn't think of that. But and just call it mixed media. I mean, but I'm really fascinated with that idea, because to carry over a transparent image, at times you can kind of do it in Photoshop, but other times it's like it's not quite strong enough. It loses something in the translation, so to speak. And I'm going to get Procreate. I don't have it, but I'm like, that sounds like, because I'd like to I was thinking I want to transition to painting, but I'm like, I have a 10 by 10 studio. I don't have room to put all my clean photo stuff and then have paint and stuff all over. But this is a way that the bridge, I really can see myself moving some pieces like that, and then I'll come back for advice. So, I know where you live. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating. And I'm like, this
The
is
thing
kind
that-
of what I was looking for.
The thing that I like about Procreate, one, it's clean and you can do it, and I do it. If you see me on Instagram, I basically do something every day, and a lot of that's at night. But I have a big Apple TV, and I use my iPad and I project it up onto the TV. So I'm looking at an image that's 32 by a big, so I can see what it would look like as a big piece, and then I actually work on it that way. So it's big. So that kind of, Alan, goes back to your thing in terms of what it would look like. But yeah, Procreate's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's giving
You're
me all kinds of new ideas.
Great. Fran has a question.
Hi.
Hi, Fran.
Loved seeing your work.
Thank
Very beautiful, just stunning. I also am very interested in the transparency. I mean, transparency is that's everything to me. And I was wondering if, and I just am not familiar with the materials as very well, but if you were using the Mylar and Plexi, could you also back it in Plexi and mount that?
Good,
So,
sure.
yeah, I have a couple of pieces that are on Yupo paper that's transparent. And I mounted them that way so the light goes, even though it's not on a window, at least there's some light going through.
Yeah.
But that would work with Mylar and 2 pieces of Plexi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even need, so the Mylar, I buy it I buy this stuff called Duralar,
Yeah, Dualar, yes.
and I buy the big sheets, and then I also buy it in rolls.
Yeah.
Big rolls, like 20-yard rolls.
Yeah. Those the screen concept, the idea that came about, serendipitously, that is what I'm all about. And that is so exciting to me. So yeah, lovely work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, one more question. I was on your website while everybody was talking, and it looks like a fraction of what, many of the pieces you showed here are not on your site. Is just a fraction of what you have on your site, or?
Well, I think the site's too busy already. And I need to for a while I was doing it, I put them all up there, but I thought it's too much. So occasionally I'll do 20 or 30 new pieces,
Yeah.
particularly the digital stuff. I tend to have more of the paintings up there, which I sell. I can still sell some of the paintings. And I've sold on my site, I don't know, 10 of the digital things. I don't try very hard to do it, but
Is that art storefront or what
Yeah,
is? Yeah,
that is.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I don't want to dominate, so thank you.
no worries.
So I have a question, Peter. Thank you so much for explaining your process so articulately. And I've just, because of course I have my urban grids, of course I love the mapping idea that you're doing. And when you talked about referencing the Goldberg and so forth, I listen to a lot of Philip Glass when I'm in my studio because I love how he builds compositions with layers of repetitive sound.
Yep.
And they're like
I love him too.
soundscapes of layering that I feel like really works well with how I build my artwork. So I tend to listen to music in the studio that really works with what I'm working on. And so that I never thought about actually doing a series based on that. So that's really interesting. But my question is, the landscape is informing your work very deeply. And not only with the mapping, the bird's eye view of looking down, but then also combining that with a distance or horizon line. Do you see these combinations as a kind of a new form of landscape architecture? Or can you flesh that out a little bit more and talk a little bit more about that?
It is something I think about. I've thought about it. And that one piece I was talking about, the sleigh head, where I'm trying to get two kinds of perspective down and out at the same time on the same, which is impossible, I think, but it kind of looked like that to me. Yeah, it could. It's growing up as a kid in New Mexico. My dad had an airplane and we would fly around, and that's where maybe my first connection with Diebenkorn came, because he lived in New Mexico and he was flying between New Mexico and San Francisco frequently, and he would look out the window and see the same kinds of things. So yeah, I go back and forth, and that I'm now swinging back into the real landscapes and doing paintings again, because I get, and I think my brother's the one that came up with the term, maybe somebody else did, but he calls it the tyranny of the horizon. And if you're a landscape painter, you know what that means. It's like, as soon as you put a line, doesn't matter if it's an inch off the bottom, or that's a horizon. Everything above that sky, everything below that's earth. And it's like, I don't really want it. Or if you do it, well, however you do it, the horizon line is a horizon line. So I'm trying to come up with different things. Actually, there's a really interesting guy. His name is Garth. He's an abstract landscape painter. And he does these really interesting. His name is Garth Edwards. And I bought the book on Amazon, and it's called Abstract Landscapes. And he has this whole way of looking at things. He starts flat with a couple of spots of oil paint, and he uses tons of turpentine, which is somewhat suspect, but he kind of pushes that all the way through. Then he lets it dry, and he's the guy that got me thinking about glazes. And then he puts multiple glazes, multiple layers, but his stuff is just ethereal. It's beautiful if you look him up. So I guess that's kind of an answer. Yeah, I kind of haven't thought about it as landscape architecture, but it's yeah, it kind of is.
Okay. No, so you say that basically you just started painting one day, right? Did you do any workshops at all, or did you just bought the materials and you just started doing stuff? Yeah. And so there was absolutely, you didn't even want that whole influence thing about.
I wouldn't say no. I was always interested in art. My brothers, as I said, is an artist. My mom was an artist. I have uncles that were artists. I was more of a musician and I was an English teacher. I did different things, and a banker. So I was just doing different things. But it was always this, in a way, urge. It's like an itch in a way. And I finally got to the point where I had the space to do it. And I thought, and my brother's very supportive. He said, go buy, let's go. So he was in town and we went and bought some canvases and we bought this stuff. But I just kind of said, okay, I just started experimenting. And in some ways, I think it's great, because it doesn't stop me from thinking up these kind of crazy processes that I do. Because if you're, I think some people that have an MFA, it's like, it's possible you get blinders and you get, oh, that won't work. And I've discovered a lot of things, they're right, they don't work. But it's always, it keeps you going. So I keep coming back to the landscapes for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm from the Southwest and you have this big openness about it, but yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I'll chime in if nobody else is at the moment. Peter, that's a wonderful presentation, and it's really nice to see, interesting to see the whole trajectory of your career in art and the way you, there's a certain level of continuity despite all of the experimentation that you've done. I think that shows up in your work, which is impressive. And it seems like in the last, once you discovered like using plexiglass and Duralar and these transparent materials and the Procreate and stuff, everything just exploded in terms of creative possibilities for you, which is really exciting. And I was interested in particular, your color qualities that you're getting out of with the Procreates and things is really stunning and real unique, I think, to your own personality, I guess you'd say. And then you mentioned that you are starting to take some segments of or starting to try to, I guess, reinvest these ideas back into relatively large scale paintings again. And I'm wondering about that process for you and how it's been, and how my experience sometimes has been when I've done something digitally, and I have a lot more limited experience than you, but I've done some experimentation with that and then thinking, oh, I'd like to paint that. And then because I love the image that I created on the computer, but when I go to try to replicate it or translate it into that other medium, it just very quickly for me falls flat. I feel like I'm trying to copy myself, or so many of your images are discovered in process. And so could you talk a little bit about how that translation is going for you and what you think?
Yeah, well, it's still early days. So like this big one that's behind me. And I think what's going to happen, because I've always had that same thing. If I go from a reference, I never get there. I'll try to do something, it doesn't work out. But some of the paintings then go their own direction. So I'm thinking it's the base, right? So it's an idea, and I've actually, this one, I took it and I've got a good representation of the drawing, the line drawings, and then I went in with charcoal and drew it. But I have a feeling that it's gonna end up not at all like the reference. Actually, this is, can you see that?
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that I printed out on my printer. And that's kind of where I'm going with it, but I don't think, the other thing is the mixing of the colors is much easier in digitally than it is in real life. I mean, to get to those, like in that piece I just showed you, the pastels and the peaches and those things. I mean, it takes time to, in particular, then if you're trying to do it on a big scale. So that's the challenge. But I think, I don't know, to me, and Anna, I think you told me you have a friend that every one of her pieces, she takes something from one piece and puts it into the next one. It's like sourdough bread, it's like, okay, here, you go start from a different, the same place. It seems like that these series just turn into something else. I mean, the one I was doing with maps turned into the screens, and then I put those two together, and now, and the other thing is that I'm at a spot where I want to not do so many small stuff because I like doing big stuff. That's why I bought some big canvases, some 48 by 60 inch canvases, and I'll do that. So we'll see where it goes. I don't know.
I'd like to say something to Don about what he just said. I do preliminary sketches in Photoshop of almost all of the pieces I create in 3D. And so because I come from a graphic design background, I didn't get an MFA or whatever. I just kind of fell into painting a little bit like Peter's been talking about. But I actually did take a class with somebody who taught me to push paint around. So what I realized very quickly is that there are things you can do in Photoshop that you can never get in painting. And there are things you can do in painting that you can never get in Photoshop. So I am able to flip a switch and say, okay, I'm using this strictly as a compositional tool for what I want to create in the studio. And then what I go into the studio and create the piece from that Photoshop sketch, I, revel in the happy accidents that happen with the paint. I love the serendipity that happens there. I decide to edit stuff out of that Photoshop sketch because it's not working in the painting. And I'm able to let it evolve into its own self with this different medium. And as long as you recognize the difference between the two, you can still use it as a tool. And just keep in mind that it's simply just a rudimentary sketch. You're not trying, there is no way that you can recreate and paint what you can do with digital. You just can't. I think Peter has found this combine thing that really works, and I'm intrigued by it, but it's still going to always become something other.
Yeah.
So you just, if you can keep that in the back of your mind and just use the digital tools as a tool and know you're going to come up with something other in the studio, I think you'll be a lot happier about those transitions.
Right. That's pretty much what I've discovered as well from my own processes. It's and I think it's partly maybe the seductiveness of using Photoshop or using media that way. There's so many possibilities. There's so many. It is mind expanding, and then sometimes when you go back to paint, to the canvas. You sense more acutely maybe the limitations of the material you're working with. So you have to deal with that. You have to have a strategy, and that's a good one that you've described, Anna.
Yeah, just know that it's just a sketch.
Yes.
And it's not going to be the ultimate goal.
Right.
So you can't, you just can't get that to be the ultimate goal. And so that's how I live with it. And because I've been on Photoshop since its infancy, I've seen the whole, even before Adobe bought it out and transformed it, I know what its limitations are. And so coming at it from that direction is what helped me once I got to the studio.
Sure.
But I also do create really cool, what I call general graphics images in Photoshop. And then I print them out. I've gone to that Echo Tank printer with Epson, which is the ink is so much cheaper than those cartridges. So I've made that investment, and I love this printer. And I make sure that I print out on acid-free paper, and then I use that stuff in my collage work. So there's lots of ways that you can use technology as a tool in the studio for sketches, for collage work, for all kinds of things. And just remember, it's a tool, like an X-Acto blade. It's a tool.
Yeah, I think Lee does stuff where he'll do an Excel spreadsheet and print that out and put those in his work, which is very interesting. So
exactly, yeah. So there's all kinds of ways you can use technology in the painting studio. Just find what appeals to you about the different things and know that they're going to be different.
Okay. Judy, did you have a question? Maybe not.
Hi. I just love the minimalism in your work. There's something just beautifully serene about it.
Thank you.
And I really feel like you really capture in I live in New Mexico. I've been living in New Mexico for the last 49 years.
Mm.
And the way you capture the land, it just speaks so much of where I live. And your work to me, has an emotional dimension to it. And it seems like a lot of the things you paint, you're painting from memories of New Mexico, Japan, other places. Of course, you're painting your current environment. But I'm wondering, do you work, I sense a lot of emotion in your work. Do you work from memory, or do you work from photographs, or do you work from your dreams? I would just, if you could talk a little bit about that.
So I guess it's, so I don't work from photographs, like I said, because I don't have any luck doing that. It's an emotive thing. So you're right about the emotional stuff. But a lot of times I'll be painting, I'll be doing something, and a lot of artists say this, and I think Don, you said it. The painting kind of just presents itself to you at some point, and you start to see certain things in it. I fight that because I have this page under plexiglass on my desk, on my table, the Richard Diebenkorn's 10 Commandments, and one of them is basically, if you see something that you recognize in a painting, get rid of it. So it's don't go there. So don't try to be representational. But a lot of times I'll do something, and then I'll say that really reminds me of Ireland, and maybe that's what I was thinking about it, but it wasn't conscious. It wasn't, because if I say, oh, I'm going to do something about Ireland, I'm probably going to get too much green paint or something. It's just not going to work. But it kind of goes together. So it is, and I'm sure all of us that are abstract painters, once if you're really in the zone, so to speak, it's a magical. It's the only thing I can say that's close to it is if you're playing in an ensemble, if you're a musician, you're playing things. The way it just feels really cool when you're one part of that. There's the same kind of thing that I get if I'm in the studio, maybe not even any music going on, but it's just like you get into this, it's just this, I don't know how to describe it, but it is emotional. So yeah. That's why I do it, because it's an outlet for that. So
And I have a feeling that you were not working from photographs, that you were working from some other place because of everything you bring into that. All of
but that's why I would
memory, emotion, wonder, magic. It's really evident in your work. I have a couple questions. One thing I wanted to say, the Sangre de Cristos, they're also in northern New Mexico. The mountains right outside of Santa Fe. That area might have been this section in Colorado, but I just wanted to say it does come down to Santa Fe. Where did you live in New Mexico? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Roswell.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you grow up in Roswell?
Until, there was a big air base down there until I'm 72. So I was born in 1950. There was a big SAC air base down there. And then we moved away from like 58, 59, moved up to Colorado. So I was there. So that I have that's the other connection I have with the bomb, and why I'm doing this Trinity thing is because it was New Mexico. My uncle actually was out in the garden the morning of when they did the test, and it's 120 miles away. Los Alamos is from Roswell. Yeah. He saw the blast. He didn't know what it was for a couple of years because they didn't say anything. But I have that, and then going to Japan and living in Japan and going to Hiroshima, going to Nagasaki. So, but that's all that New Mexico stuff. Yeah, I haven't lived in New Mexico since 1958, so it's been a long time.
But I'm sure you've visited a number of times because you really do have a sense of the land.
I think it's it's kind of in your DNA in a way. It's not in your DNA. But, you can't get away from your background in that respect.
And the painting of Dingle was lovely. I've been to Dingle, so it did definitely remind me.
So that one was one I did, and it absolutely did not have that in mind. And when I was done with it, I said, God, that looks like Dingle. Looks like the harbor from the, so
Yeah,
that kind of comes to me.
yeah. Well, thank you. It was such a treat to see
Thank
a
you.
survey of your work and to see, just a dynamic growth, and just thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
Guess
Okay,
not.
well, I think we'll close the forum. So Peter, thank you so much. It was another inspiring talk in our series. So I really appreciate it. So, and thanks everybody for showing up.